Welcome back to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock. And
that one word threw me off so bad.
It's so non-essential that you didn't need us for the last 2 weeks.
I know we haven't had a 2-week break since the last time we took a 2-week break.
Yeah. It was desperately needed. We were talking about it off air. I was clinging to life.
You're patient number 0 in this coronavirus thing, yeah. So
and now
we all know who to blame.
And it's just a matter of time before I turn into like one of those like fuck you monsters in like Resident Evil or some shit where just everything's gone wrong. That's how it always happens in like horror movies and shit. It's like patient 0 is always like, I think I beat it. I'm immune now. And then just like, like after just like one day of feeling like great.
You wake up tomorrow and be like brushing your teeth and looking in the mirror like, weird, I don't remember having a third arm.
Oh, it's weird. And there's an eyeball on it. It's almost like a giant weak point if anyone needed to shoot me. That's weird. But yeah, I was super sick and you were super moving.
Yeah, last week. The week before I probably could have gone, but you were dead.
Yeah,
wasn't happening. I think you were in hospice. And then, last week we moved and I didn't have internet. It's hard to do the show without internet.
Well, some people would say it would improve.
That's true.
But fuck them. Smart asses. Anywho, I don't remember what we last did a show about. I think we did a creepypasta or something.
It's a creepypasta, yeah.
Okay. Trying to remember what this show is. Like, I don't even... I said I'm Ben Matlock to start this, and I don't even know if I believe that anymore. But anyway, you got something today, so let's not fuck around.
And it's an appropriate one for coming back after a short hiatus like that. So, like just about every aspect of life at the time, cross-country travel in the 1800s was a nightmare. Traveling to another state or even just another part of the same state could easily mean weeks on the road away from relative comforts of the day. So the need for supplies, warm meals, and shelter was ever present.
Unless you cross-train,
Yeah, if you
CrossFit
were Bear Grylls. Yeah. Pilgrim Extreme.
And then
I guess not Pilgrim, but...
And then you know exactly where to find fucking tree grubs that just explode gross shit in your mouth.
Look, if you piss into your own hands, but hold your fingers tight enough together, you'll siphon out just the water. I promise.
Squeeze the piss in your cupped hands into your mouth. It'll act as a natural filter.
That would last like 30 seconds in the wild, but...
I'd do really good. I'd make it.
Anyway, fortunately for the Bender family, who in the 1870s built a homestead along the Great Osage Trail in Kansas... those needs provided a way for them to eke out a steady living. The Benders were part of a larger group of spiritualists who settled in the area. After John and his son John Jr. completed construction on their house and its well, they were joined by the elder John's wife, Elvira, and their daughter, Kate. They divided their home with a sheet or a wagon cover, giving the building a rear room where the family lived, and allowing the front of the home to serve as a small general store, tavern, and inn. Elvira and Kate also planted a small, or huge by my standards, because it was still like 2 or 3 acres, I think they said, vegetable garden and orchard.
Just a modest size of your house vegetable garden, you know.
Right, anything more than like 2 plants to me is a pretty good size garden. While the older John and his wife Elvira spoke very little English, Kate and John Jr. were both fluent. The parents kept largely to themselves, but the 25-year-old John Jr. and the 23-year-old Kate often went to town for Bible study and whatnot. Both were said to be very attractive, but there were rumors that Kate wasn't actually John's sister, but rather his wife. Kate advertised her services as a clairvoyant and spiritualist, and she was an outspoken proponent of free love. And as it turns out, a young, attractive, seemingly single, but maybe not, woman who believes in things like sexuality and marriage should not be shackled by traditional values is a fabulous way to draw in business from traveling gentlemen who may or may not be accompanied by their wives and families.
Hi, I've come to take you up on your offer for free love today. It seems like a very good deal.
Yeah. One bowl of stew and a side of free love. Which might explain why, like, they said she was their daughter when she was really his wife, because it's more attractive to gentlemen if they think she's single.
Is it, though? I was going to say, this is going to get all kind of fucking sleazy.
That's true.
Yeah. The thing is, most guys, unfortunately, especially back then, probably didn't give a shit.
Well, especially for what they're looking for. It's not like they're like, oh, great, she's single, I can marry her.
And if they were husband and wife and out up front with it, it's like, what are you going to be what are you going to do? You're going to be mad at me? She said it was free love, dude. Like, you knew what she was selling.
Right, she's not going to get attached. Maybe that makes sense.
I have a coupon, sir. It says I get to spend the night with your wife.
Look, you got to read closer. That's with the purchase of 2 large pizzas and a soda.
I bought 2 milks and a pack of eggs, and I get your wife for the night. It doesn't expire until tomorrow, and that doesn't count.
So in May of 1871, about a year after they moved in, the body of a man known simply as Jones was found in Drum Creek. His head had been bashed in and his throat had been slit. Now, I know you're thinking, hey, Steve, you just opened by talking about this seemingly random family and then threw in a murder. I bet one of the Benders did it. But you absolutely should not jump to that conclusion. Instead, you should suspect the owner of the property where the body was found. That's exactly what authorities suspected because, unlike you, they did not have a handful of introductory paragraphs about the Bender family to tip them off.
Well, the moment free love was mentioned, I was like, okay, people are going to die. Because love ain't ever been free, my friends.
Generally, the moment we say, welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast, you know people are going to die because that's just what we do. So, luckily for whoever owned this stretch of land where the body was found, they were unable to find any evidence to link him to the murder, and so he was never charged, which is kind of a miracle because
that's amazing. Because your
if they
only
thought
evidence there is like, well, it's on your stuff.
Yeah, if they thought you were guilty back then, everything was evidence.
They must have really liked that guy.
According to these footprints, the killer wore shoes. Do you not also wear shoes? Ha ha, guilty.
Yeah, totally.
So almost a year later, 2 more bodies were found. Both victims were murdered in the same manner as Jones, with their skulls bashed in and throats slashed. In fact, people began noticing that there were a lot of travelers who were coming up missing after having passed through the area, and it didn't take long for them to connect the dots. The picture that emerged was murder most foul. I don't know why I wrote that in there, but I had to say it.
It was very Sherlock.
Yeah. So travelers began avoiding the area entirely because, as it turns out, people don't like being murdered. It's unclear if the Benders were ever suspected of the disappearances or in the disappearances. And if they weren't, it's probably because, as it turns out, the area was full of known thieves, bandits, killers, and generally bad people. So, like, this settlement of spiritualists was really more like people that were running from things, and they just kind of, like an outlaw camp, if you will.
Yeah.
Vigilante groups began forming, and various people were arrested for the various disappearances, though all were later released when, the actual authorities stepped in and pointed out that they didn't have any evidence against anybody. It was basically like the witch hunts, except for no witchcraft was suspected. It was just, you're murdering them. No, you're murdering them. You're all murdering them. So in the winter of 1872, when Mr. George Newton Longcore and his infant daughter left their home in Independence, Kansas, traveling to Iowa, where they planned to resettle. But when they failed to arrive, their former neighbor, Dr. William Henry York, went looking for them.
That's pretty, a lot of these stories about, these long fucking attempts to relocate and shit, there always seems to be, some, fucking neighbor who, gives way more of a shit than we ever will in 2020.
Exactly.
It's hey, we're moving. Well, good luck with that. And it's like you never see them again, and you plan on never seeing them again.
But you never follow up to see if they even made it. You just assume they're like, well, they're gone.
They're gone.
I hope the new neighbor's wife is hot.
I hope she believes in free love.
So anyway, when they didn't arrive, and obviously he followed up, or maybe somebody there wrote back to whatever, but they figured out that they never made it. So Dr. William Henry York went looking for him. Dr. York didn't find them on his trip out west, so he turned around and headed back home. But of course, he never made it back home. But as it turns out, Dr. York had two brothers. One was Colonel Ed York, and the other was Kansas State Senator Alexander York. And if history has taught us anything, it's that you can murder all the poor people you want, but if you murder somebody from a wealthy, connected family, you're screwed.
Yeah. How dare you?
So Colonel York began questioning people along his missing brother's known routes, which I guess I could point out too. This Osage Trail, where this Benders and this whole town was located, was like one of the only major thoroughfares to go west. So that's why it was so noticeable with all these people missing, is because everybody was basically funneled through the area anyway.
Right.
So it was kind of easy to trace back their route, like where did they not show up at the next town?
Yeah. Because it's not like, hey, we might, you know what? Let's get off this exit and go take a fucking scenic route through Murder Valley. How interesting.
Which tells you, when it says people were actively avoiding the area, that meant they were basically traveling through unpaved foothills to get around it. So,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, Colonel York began questioning people along the route, which eventually took him to the Bender's Inn. When he explained he was looking for his missing brother, the younger Bender, who, if you remember, was only one of the two that could speak English, admitted that he had stayed there. They told the colonel that his brother had likely run into trouble with the local Indians, and the colonel, of course, agreed, because obviously it had to be the native people who, for some reason, didn't like the very people who had murdered them and stole their land. Yeah, savages.
It's always the other. It's like, it can't be these upstanding free love fuckers. But I do like how.
What color are you? White? Okay, you're cleared.
But I do like how in these really obvious crime story setups, just lie. Why do these people who run these fucking business covers be like, oh yeah, they were here. Just say they weren't. And then it's it completely fucks the timeline up for them. If you're trying to hide shit.
Yeah. I hear they were in the last town, but they never made it here. Yeah. But how did you know that was? I know everybody who comes into the last town.
You just played dumb. It was we haven't had a lodger in 15 years.
I guess the only thing is, if you lie and say they weren't, and somebody else in town says, "Oh yeah, I saw them," then it makes you
Well, I mean that's when you do. That's when you look out for number one, and you be like, "I didn't see anyone," but doesn't mean they weren't here.
You might want to check his attic.
Yeah.
He's been busy up there. So, of course, the colonel kind of believed him, said, yeah, it was probably Indians. And him and his men, he wasn't traveling alone. He had a group of people with him. Left the inn, but they were still kind of in the area. Of course, they weren't going to just be like, okay, that's the end of that chapter. But a few days later, they came across a woman who told them about how she had stayed at the Bender's Inn when Evelyn had violently threatened her with a knife, but she was lucky to narrowly escape. The colonel thought that was an interesting story and decided to return to the inn to discuss the accusation. But because she couldn't speak English very well, Evelyn didn't understand what he was asking. The younger Bender denied the incident
Which
ever
again,
happened.
Amazing show of restraint back then, because it's you don't understand, you're guilty. Yeah.
Right. So she didn't understand, I no speak the English good. Although I think Germany is where they said they were from. The younger Bender, he could speak, but he said, no, that never happened. This, we never threatened her, blah, blah, blah. But after repeating the accusation, Evelyn grew enraged and shouted that the woman who was accusing her was actually a witch, and that she had cursed her coffee, which I guess is something that witches did back then.
And you can't do that. Because Coffee was already so rough back then, and people, it was the one bright part of their day.
It's not really coffee. They just run water through the topsoil, and they're like, look, it's brown now. Look, let's heat it up and drink.
We sifted it. It's good now.
But when Evelyn flew off the handle, it not only confirmed her violent temper, but also kind of brought to light the fact that she and also her husband actually did speak English and were only pretending not to. This, of course, was very suspicious, which I'm sure the colonel made known that.
He's like, okay, well, I guess we're going to have a longer chat.
Well, fortunately, that opportunity was going to present itself because before he left, the young Kate Bender asked if he could return alone a few days later, definitely not in the company of the rest of the search party, so that she could use her psychic abilities to help him find his brother. I assume she unbuttoned the top two buttons of her dress, her blouse first.
This is all, yeah.
Yeah. So Colonel Ed York may have been a little too eager to accept the idea that the Indians killed his brother. But luckily, he wasn't a complete fucking moron, and he was in no way interested in returning to their inn alone.
Yeah.
So at this point, York and his men were sure
again, amazing restraint back then, because most guys would be like, just drop everything and like, oh yeah. Awesome.
A private reading, you say?
All of you here to watch my ass, get out of here. You're cock blocking me.
You can read palms. What else can you read, young lady? So anyway, York and his men were sure the Benders were guilty, along with the neighboring Roach family. I know that seems random, but I'll get to it. York's men wanted to hang them all on the spot, but York insisted that they must first find evidence. So again, there's a lot of parts in this story that don't follow our normal stories on here. Normally on an Essential podcast, it'd be like, we think they did it, murder them on the spot.
Yeah.
Fortunately for York and his men, it was about this time that the neighboring communities also began to suspect that the people of Osage, I think I'm saying this right, but Osage or Osage community were responsible in some way for numerous disappearances over the last few months. So as they were trying to put their case together against the Benders, these other communities were like, yeah, something's up. A meeting was held. The meeting was attended by both males of the Bender family, so John and John Jr., and Colonel York, and about 75 other citizens from the area. It was agreed that there was enough suspicion there to warrant to issue a search warrant for all the houses, basically in the whole settlement. But 3 days after the meeting, a passerby noticed that the Bender's place appeared to be vacant and that the animals had gone unfed. He reported it to authorities, but due to bad weather, 3 more days would pass before a search party of nearly 100 people were organized to go investigate. As it turns out, if you publicly accuse someone of murder and you tell them that you're going to be eventually searching their place, you should probably keep an eye on them to make sure that they stick around.
Yeah.
The Bender's place had been emptied of all food and personal possessions, and the Benders were nowhere to be found. Whoops. There was a strong odor coming from the Bender's inn, and a trap door was soon found, revealing a small room hidden beneath the floor.
That could be, anyone's death dungeon,
I'm down in my basement right now. Maybe they were doing podcasts. They just needed a quiet place.
I just moved into this place. I don't know all the rooms yet.
And as we all know, anybody that podcasts emits a strong odor.
That's, let's not shame people for things they can't control. Okay.
Okay. I emit a strong odor, and maybe other podcasters do. They did not find anything down there except for some clotted blood. They ended up busting up the stone floor and didn't find anything under that. They kind of determined that the smell was just coming from the amount of blood that had seeped into the soil. One of the things I read said they actually picked up and moved the shack which sounds funny, but until
you just imagine two guys on each side, okay, 1, 2, 3,
2, 3, lift with your legs. I mean, lift with thine legs. I don't know how they spoke back then.
That's how I injured my ribs. Me and my bro lifting shacks.
The house, yeah. But they didn't find anything at all under the shack, so they started probing around in the garden, and by the end of the first day, they had found 7 bodies.
Oh no.
Yeah.
How could this have happened in a world of free love?
One of the 7 bodies was Colonel York's brother. The next day, they kind of had to give it up because it got dark, which is always a good murder investigation when you're still turning up bodies and you're like, well, let's call it a night and come back tomorrow. The next day they found 8 more bodies.
Holy shit.
All of the bodies except one had been, you could tell they were murdered in the same way. Their head was bashed in and then their throats were slashed, or their throats slashed and then their heads bashed in, but that doesn't, see, the other way makes more sense. The one body that didn't have that happened was of a young infant girl who showed no signs of trauma, and they assumed had been either strangled or buried alive. And that would be
sucks.
Yeah. That would be the man and his daughter that kind of spurred, the doctor to search for him, which spurred his brothers to search for him.
Yeah.
So upon finding the bodies, the people were not very happy. So they were so angered by the horrible scene that they seized the Bender's family friend, a guy known as Brockman, who happened to be there, and hung him from the rafters until he lost consciousness.
Holy shit. Why?
Well, because
they just
then
see all this
him.
shit and then just one dude's there.
Yeah, they hung him until he lost consciousness, but then they revived him, interrogated him, hung him again, repeated the procedure, hung him a 3rd time, and then after that they cut him free and let him go. Although it was noted that he staggered home as if very drunk. It's like, or as if he just got fucking hanged 3 times.
Or you just deprived his brain of essential oxygen and he'll never be the same again.
So investigators followed the Bender's wagon tracks, which is amazing that they could do that 6 or 7 days after the fact. But
to be fair, like back then, it's like, okay, well, 6 other wagons maybe have passed since then.
That's true. But it turns out that having a 6 or 7 day head start on authorities is very helpful.
It doesn't help that their wagon wheels had the indent on them that said free love. So the trail
with an arrow pointing the way that they're going.
Free love this away.
This way. It's advertising. They found the Bender's wagon about 12 miles north of town. It was abandoned and the horses were like half starved and one of them was lame. So it seems like it.
I just want a story like this to end with the horses fucking the family up for abuse, Yeah.
They were being eaten by the cannibal horses.
That would be scary as shit. If you just walked into like a clearing and like horses just had like blood on their mouths.
Turns out the Benders were innocent. The horses were the
fucking killers the whole time.
Yeah. They forced the Benders to leave.
On the next Creepypasta episode. Mr. Ed's Wild Revenge.
The town near where the carriage was found, they were able to confirm that the Benders had hopped a train out west, and from there it gets kind of muddled. One investigator concluded that the 2 younger ones, John Jr. and Kate, split off and headed for an outlaw colony in New Mexico, where authorities just didn't go because at the time, if you were a lawman and you went there, you basically didn't come back. One investigator said John Jr. had made it to, it just said the border, but it didn't say the border of what. So I assume Mexico, but I don't know. But there he had died of apoplexy, I think that's how it's said. A stroke, basically, internal bleeding.
That was like the one thing back then is like there was always like even if like you weren't caught by the authorities, if you were born, you were going to get fucked up by something. You know?
You're going to have a horrible death anyway. I guess it's not justice, but kind of is.
It's not karma. Justice really, but it just sort of evens shit out, in some way.
And here's where this gets really non-essential podcasty. Numerous vigilante groups claim to have caught and killed the Benders, but none ever tried to claim the reward. So either they were full of crap, or more likely, they used the Benders as an excuse to murder other people. So, like you were just saying, the 1800s rocked.
Yeah.
2 women matching the description of Ma Bender and Kate Bender were arrested in Michigan. They were brought back to Kansas, where their identities were confirmed by the locals. And there was an extremely long and confusing account of the legal back and forth. You know, they both, of course, claimed to be different people, and they had stories. And one of them said, "Oh, the other's Miss Bender, but I'm not, you know, Kate." And then Ma Bender said, "No, that's Kate, but I'm not Ma Bender." And there was like 3 paragraphs on this whole section, and it was confusing as shit.
No, don't shoot me, shoot her. You know, it's that fucking. And
people from the area seem to say, "Yeah, that looks like them. That's them." But at the end of the day, a judge decided that it probably wasn't them. In fact, one of them had a marriage certificate showing that she had been married in Michigan, like at the time of the murders, like not married and living in Michigan, but had gotten married at the time of so it probably wasn't them.
Pretty good alibi. If you can get something right from the state on the day of, then yeah.
Well, that's the question too, though. Like, how right on the day of was it? And it's weird too, because if it really wasn't them, then why would one say the other was, and vice versa? Like,
you know, I mean, you would say whatever to get off. That was the thing. Everybody's out for number one.
Yeah, well,
so it's like, I know it's all bullshit, but I'm going to say you did it because I want to go home.
In 1884, a man matching the description of Pa Bender committed suicide in Lake Michigan. But that same year, another man matching the description was arrested for murder in Idaho. But before an investigator from Kansas could arrive to confirm his identity, that man sawed his own foot off to escape his leg shackles, which would be badass, except for he immediately died of bleeding to death.
Yes.
So by the time
what did he think would happen?
I don't know.
Like a new foot would grow out? Like, you're not a lizard,
I'll
dude.
cut my foot off to get off the shackle, then I'll use the shackle as a tourniquet. Oh, fuck, I didn't think this through.
It's like the original Saw. It's like,
it sounds like a side thing that you'd come across in Red Dead 2, honestly. But
like, I'm gonna cut it off and I'll go get help, and then it's like, you know, he didn't make it like longer than a room. Out of the
cell. Yeah. So by the time investigators arrived, the body was too badly decomposed to give a positive ID. So it could have been him, probably not. As for the Roach family, as I mentioned earlier, who were implicated as part of this, they ended up being part of 12 people from the community who were arrested and charged in connection with the murders. Not for the murders, but as it turns out, they had been guilty of forging documents and acting as fences to sell off the victim's possessions. So
nothing
basically,
wrong with that.
There's 3 or 4 families that all knew what the fuck was going on, and the Benders would murder them, do the murdering, and then these other families would all split the.
I mean, we're giving up all this love for free. We got to make a profit somehow. We got to keep the lights on around here, okay?
So that guy Brockman that I mentioned that they hung 3 times to try to interrogate him.
Yeah.
Of course, he was part of the 12 that were arrested in connection with the murders. It doesn't specify what his sentence was. As it turns out, it wasn't long enough, because 23 years later, he'd be convicted of the rape and murder of his own 18-year-old daughter. So,
okay, so I feel less bad about him being tortured now.
Yeah, they probably should have left him up there the 3rd time.
It sounded
Although today you would probably make the argument, be like, he was perfectly fine until the brain damage from being hung 3 times, and that...
Potentially, yeah. There's a documentary about that coming, you know, like that's the Aaron Hernandez story, basically. But yeah, I mean, the way it initially sounded, it was just like they were investigating the scene, and then they saw the neighbor just like watering his own shit, and they're like, "Get him!"
Fuck you! You talk to them. We've seen you talking to them in town. You're in cahoots.
Cahoots.
But it turns out, it seems like their hunch was right, because
yeah, it turns out he's a horrible piece of shit.
Right. Although, like I say, who knows? And being convicted of the rape and murder of his own daughter sounds terrible, but he might not have done that either, because justice back then was fucking stupid.
Yeah.
He might have been convicted solely based on the fact that he was tied to these other murders for no reason. Like, he might be the most, like, unfortunately innocent bystander of them all. Like, who knows? But he was probably a piece of crap.
Yeah.
But as for the Benders themselves, no one actually knows what happened to them. It seems like they probably faced a pretty bad end, but where and how, and for sure, nobody knows.
Yeah, just the hostile environment that was the 80s. The 1800s, I mean. The 1980s, the most dangerous time
they were
to
also
travel
bad.
the world.
Yeah, you never knew when you were going to turn the corner and come across a breakdancer in the street asking for tips. It's like, fuck.
It is
I was
interesting.
going to use this quarter.
Like, it is interesting, though, to think of, like, the time frame of, like, what was dangerous and, like, what we're afraid of throughout the course of American history. So, like, you have the 1800s, which was just this fucking chaotic, like, people were dangerous, the environment was dangerous, you weren't really sure what the fuck to fear the most. And then as things progressed, like, we got less and less, we got, like, more and more in control of our environments with, like, neighborhoods and cities and stuff, but we became more and more afraid of people as that shit continued.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like as bad as things can seem, and very bad things can certainly happen to you out there, it seems that we're way safer now than we were back then. But everybody's like, let's bring back the good old days.
Yeah.
It's like,
make it great again when fucking snakes would bite you on your ass when you needed to shit.
Then when you asked for help, they'd murder you and send the snake to your family. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I got. The Benders. Which is also, I thought, a great name for, like, a murdering family.
Yeah, for a fucked up murder family. Yeah, I like that. It was, it felt good to get back on the, back on the horse.
Yeah.
And talk about something that we understand, which is just because that is an incompetence story at the end of the day, really. Like, yeah, they didn't get caught, but it was just like they had no way to fucking hide it either. And just like,
yeah, I mean, that was a crime that you were not going to continue to get away with, for one. Especially not doing it the way that they were, where it's like, it seems weird to, like, especially if there's a whole, like, because back then your neighbors might mean that you own like a 2 square mile area. And it's like, let's bury the bodies 8 feet from the house.
Right. And also just like not being able to control like your temper to the point you give up like the whole fucking farce that you don't know how to speak English. Like that you can't keep it together for like one fucking accusation.
The funny part is it probably wasn't actually accusation. And they're like, they said you have a temper. What? I don't understand. No, she's fine. She's fine. That never happened. You're like, okay.
Well, it just seems like she has a bit of a temper. Fuck you, okay? You fucking asshole.
It wasn't even that. It was like, why don't you stay here for the night? It's like, nah, God, I'm sorry, but your food's just no good. And she's like, what do you mean my food's no fucking good? Come over here. I'm going to bash your head in with a hammer and slit your throat.
Bitch witch I tried to stab over my coffee.
I killed your brother. I could kill you. I mean,
have a good day. Guten Tag.
But then on the flip side of it, it's like this guy seems so like, I want to say educated, like just advanced for the day without the whole like, we need a trial. No, we need some evidence before.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's get a warrant. But then at the same time, it's like right in front of these people. It's like, we think you all did it.
Yeah.
Please don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a month or so when we've got the paperwork.
Yeah, he had a very interesting mind for how the world worked back then.
Maybe because he was so, like, relatively fair that he assumed they would be too.
Well, I think he really, like, had, like, those sort of, like, Sherlock Holmes stories in his head of, like, I mean, I don't think the stories were written then, but just, like, that mentality of, like, all right, well, I figured out you did it. You lost the game. Wait here while we go prepare your punishment, and like they would just be like, fuck, we lost the game.
It looks like the first Sherlock Holmes story was 1887, so close. Maybe it was actually based on this, even though they weren't set in this way, and they probably had
like turning down what would have been for sure sex and then your murder was a very Sherlock Holmes move, Right.
Because so many guys, even if they saw it coming, they're like, well, I'm definitely going to get murdered, but man, she's 23.
I'll probably get laid. So
yeah.
Yeah. It's So yeah, probably. I mean, he's a buffoon, but he's certainly a hero. One of the few true heroes to grace this podcast.
The other weird thing, though, is that, like, if you think about it, this inn was described as a small shack that a number of guys could move, so it obviously wasn't a big building, divided by a sheet. So, like, these travelers staying at the inn, if that was really what was drawing them there, it's like, yeah, let's do it while your family's on the other side of the sheet. That makes it... I mean, I guess for some people that...
How do you think love is free? You don't pay for the walls. You gotta make it work.
Yeah, there's some
costs.
Sacrifices you have to make for discount love.
Look, I can't go through it all. Take my business class, and I'll tell you how you can have all the sex you want, but what it's gonna cost, you know?
I mean, truly, our expectation of privacy today is another one of those things, like you were talking about, that has drastically changed between now and then. Like,
that's the thing. Like, did you really need privacy back then? Like, everyone knew.
These families had like 18 kids and lived in a single story building. So obviously the parents were doing it.
They know the fucking mechanics. They know what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Godspeed, Bender family, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Hopefully you died in like the most fucking painful, like fucking explosive diarrhea way the Old West could offer you.
I would like just the poetic justice of, while they're on the run, they had to stop at somebody's inn and the innkeeper
got murdered and the cycle continued.
Right.
That would be fucking hilarious.
It's like what? It follows 1880s version.
That'll probably be pretty tough to find, but I want to see if we could find some stories about serial killers who ran into other serial killers and just got their whole shit fucked up. It can go like two ways. Like they either get killed by the other, or they like meet up and turn this into like a competitive thing. Like, yeah. Well, like there's a lot of stories about serial killers like partnering up and then throwing each other under the bus. But I think it would be fucking hilarious if one of them just like trying to do their own evil shit got caught by another one doing their evil shit, and like, you know, and then hijinks ensue, because that's lighthearted entertainment.
I've thought about that. I'm going to have to, we'll both be like Googling that over the next week. But,
it's a really specific search. It's one of those types of things where it's like, man, if any like law enforcement looked at like what I was trying to find for this fucking podcast, they'd probably be a little concerned.
Well, yeah, and that is a we were just watching,
because we'll just see like serial killer of serial killers, and like, is this guy trying to be Dexter? What the fuck?
That's one of those things that, and it's funny. I was just watching a Dateline last night, actually, where they, like, when they started investigating the people who shockingly turned out to be guilty, they're like, oh, and their Google search history turned up like how to kill someone quickly, how to hide a body. I'm like, who the fuck Googles that? Like,
yeah, well, you got to get on the dark web for those kind of questions. You can't just
at least clear your
Google.
Damn browser cache. I mean, come on.
So that's the thing, like when they like keep their history, because what if I need to quick Google it again, you know?
They have it bookmarked.
Yeah, so anyway, that was a show. That was fun. We're back.
We're live.
Yeah. So we'll do it again next week, I guess. That seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Who knows though? Like, this felt good. Maybe like 2 weeks off, 1 week on is the pace we should.
It's kind of
that would be the Patreon reward tier. If like, where you get even less of us, the more you pay us.
We'd make a ton of money that way. People be like, I can actually pay to shut them up.
Yeah, if we get 10,000 a month, we'll stop doing it entirely. So think of the savings ultimately. But anyway, we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Toodaloo.
Damn it, I was going to say toodaloo.
Too late, I beat you to it, fucker.